The night sky was a deep, choking black, pierced only by the scattered fire of tracer rounds and distant explosions. In the heart of a remote Afghan valley, a team of Navy SEALs huddled behind the charred remains of their downed armored vehicle. Dust clung to every surface, mixed with the metallic tang of blood and spent gunpowder. Their extraction helicopter had been shot down mere minutes ago, its flaming wreckage smoldering on the jagged mountainside, a grim testament to their isolation. The enemy was closing in, their shouts rising over the crackle of gunfire like a tide of inevitability. Lieutenant Marcus Hawk Thorne pressed his back against the scorched steel of the vehicle, eyes scanning the shadows. His team's 6 men, each trained for moments like this, each fighting a panic that refused to be silenced, waited for orders that would never come. Radio contact had been dead for almost 10 minutes. Command had gone quiet. Every second stretched like an eternity. "Check your mags," Hawk growled, his voice low and steady, masking the tremor he felt in his chest. Blood ran down Corporal Jensen's arm from a shrapnel wound, yet the younger man didn't flinch, eyes fixed on the tree line where movement flickered. The enemy was organized, trained, and merciless. They had the valley pinned, and if the SEALs didn't move, they would be buried here without a trace. Hawk's hand hovered over the radio transmitter, hesitating. Protocol said no final transmissions without clearance, but command was dead silent. If anyone was going to die tonight, they would at least go on record. He keyed the mic. "This is Team Viper Actual. Situation critical. Coordinates are..." His voice faltered slightly as he recited the grid, then continued with mechanical precision. "We are outnumbered. Casualties are critical. Request immediate exfil. This may be our last transmission." A beat of silence answered. Dust swirled in the darkness, carrying the faint scent of burnt rubber and scorched earth. The men exchanged looks, each reading the fear and determination mirrored in the other's faces. Then, through the static and hiss of the radio, a voice came. "Say again," Ghost Actual responding. The words cut through the chaos like a knife. Ghost Actual, a call sign that didn't exist, at least not officially. The SEALs froze, adrenaline spiking, as each operator processed what had just happened. "Ghost, that's impossible," muttered Sergeant Ramirez, voice barely audible over the distant explosions. Hawk's jaw tightened. He keyed the mic again, unsure whether he was hallucinating. Coordinates repeated. Team Viper pinned in the southern valley. Extraction impossible. Request confirmation. "Copy that," came the calm, measured response. "Coordinates confirmed. Hold position. I see your markers. You're not alone." Silence fell, heavier than the gunfire, thicker than the dust. The SEALs looked at each other, disbelief etched into every line of their faces. Ghost Mercer, the pilot declared killed years ago after a classified mission had disappeared without a trace. No body, no wreckage, no funeral, just a legend whispered through the ranks. And now, impossibly, he was alive, or at least someone speaking with his call sign. Corporal Jensen swallowed hard, wincing as the wound in his arm burned. You think it's really him?" he asked. Hawk didn't answer immediately, scanning the horizon where faint flashes hinted at enemy movement. "Does it matter?" he finally said. "Someone is coming, and that voice, it knows what we're facing." The static on the radio shifted and Ghost's voice returned, steady as a heartbeat. "Stay low. Keep moving when I count 3. Enemy positions are marked. I'm marking fire zones. You'll have 30 seconds once I engage." Hawk's mind raced. 30 seconds wasn't much, but the precision in the voice, the calm certainty, stirred something primal in him, a flicker of hope where there had been none. "We follow your lead," he said, keying the mic again. "Good," Ghost replied. "Visual confirmation, you're all in range. Keep tight, move on my mark." The SEALs tightened their formation, weapons at the ready. Around them, the valley seemed to hold its breath. Even the enemy paused, momentarily confused by the sudden surgical strikes erupting from above. Rockets flared, tracer rounds lit up the night, and explosions sent waves of heat across the valley. The SEALs moved, sprinting from cover to cover as Ghost's voice counted down. each number a pulse pounding in their ears. 3, 2, 1, move. The SEALs bolted toward a narrow clearing, their bodies propelled by training, adrenaline, and sheer instinct. Bullets whizzed past, some striking the rock, others lodging in armor, but the team pressed on, guided by a voice that seemed to know every shadow, every ridge, every blind spot the enemy could exploit. For a moment the world narrowed to movement, breath, and the echoing calm of Ghost's guidance. Hawk glanced at his men, Jensen limping but alive, Ramirez scanning constantly, eyes sharp despite fatigue, and felt a surge of disbelief. They had expected to die. Yet here they were, moving like ghosts themselves, carved out of the chaos by a hand no one had seen. Then came a moment of pure terror. From the ridge above, a salvo of enemy fire tore into the clearing, sending dirt and rock flying. Jensen cried out as a bullet grazed his shoulder, tearing a ragged line across his uniform. Hawk dove, dragging him into a shallow depression. The enemy was closer than ever. Ghost status, Hawk shouted into the radio, voice shaking. Engaged, covering fire active. Extraction point in sight. Move fast, came the calm, almost eerie reply. Hawk felt a flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Faith. Not in orders, not in luck. Faith in a man or a ghost who shouldn't exist but whose presence was the only thing keeping them alive. As the team sprinted toward the extraction zone, shadows moving like predators around them, the valley suddenly erupted in a brilliant flash. Enemy positions were obliterated with pinpoint precision. The SEALs stumbled forward, awe and fear wrestling in their hearts. Hawk realized mid-run that no one else could pull this off. The voice guiding them had knowledge, skill, and experience that transcended mere human ability. It was someone, or something, beyond what they had ever known. Then, as the smoke cleared just enough for them to see a faint glow on the ridge, the voice came one final time. "You're almost there, stay tight. I've got you, do not stop." Hawk swallowed hard, heart pounding so violently he thought it might tear through his chest. The extraction point was just ahead. But behind him, the faint hiss of missiles and the distant roar of an enemy assault reminded him that this night was far from over. And above it all, somewhere in the sky, a ghost waited, watching, guiding, ready to answer the final call. The SEALs didn't know it yet, but this night would change everything. Not just for them, but for the legend of Ghost Mercer, the pilot who had been left for dead, and who was now answering calls that no living man should ever hear. The valley's night air was heavy with smoke and dust, yet above it, an impossible sound cut through the chaos, the whine of a jet engine. It was distant at first, almost drowned by gunfire and explosions, but it grew steadily, a metallic hum that set every SEAL on edge. Hawk's eyes scanned the sky. Nothing should be there, no aircraft, no backup, nothing. And yet the voice on the radio continued, calm, guiding, precise. "Team Viper had just left 30 meters. Enemy cluster ahead," Ghost said, his tone measured, unflinching, like a lighthouse cutting through a storm. "Move fast, 30 seconds until suppression." Corporal Jensen's hand shook as he clutched his weapon. "I still can't believe this, how is he even alive?" he muttered. Hawk didn't answer immediately. Years ago they had all heard the stories, the legend of Captain Eli Ghost Mercer, a pilot declared KIA after a classified strike mission vanished without a trace. No body, no crash, just silence. And now here he was, speaking into their ears like the valley itself obeyed him. Ramirez hissed between gritted teeth, "He's real, and he's about to save our asses." The SEALs moved, adrenaline pushing them faster than their lungs could handle. Dust burned their eyes, yet the glint of tracer rounds and the flare of explosions illuminated the path, each step a fight against instinct and exhaustion. Above them, the faint silhouette of a jet cut against the clouds, moving in ways that defied conventional tactics, banking impossibly low, almost skimming treetops, yet never striking anything that wasn't meant to be struck. Ghost's voice was a steady beacon through it all. "Suppressing fire on enemy ridge. Use the smoke, move forward, keep tight." The SEALs obeyed instinctively, trusting a voice from a man they had never truly known, yet whose legend had been whispered in every briefing, every classified mission. Hawk glanced at Jensen, who limped but pressed on, and at Ramirez, scanning the horizon with a sniper's precision despite fatigue and fear. They had all trained for impossible missions, but nothing like this. Then Ghost spoke again, softer this time, almost intimate. "I've been here before," he said. "I know this terrain, trust me. You'll make it." Hawk froze. The words hit him with the weight of history. Ghost had survived here before. Was it possible that the pilot, declared dead, had been watching over missions like this for years? The thought was absurd, but when bullets screamed past them and explosions shook the ground beneath their feet, absurdity didn't matter. Survival did. The team ducked behind a jagged outcrop as an enemy squad pushed forward, weapons raised, shadows flickering like demons in the firelight. Hawk peeked over the edge, calculating angles. He keyed the mic, voice trembling. "Ghost, how close are you?" "Close enough to see your markers. Engage in 3, 2, 1. A sudden, blinding flash erupted from the ridge above. Enemy positions erupted in flames, shredded by precision strikes that no ordinary pilot could have executed in such darkness. The SEALs stumbled forward, using the chaos to advance, adrenaline surging with every step. Hawk's mind raced. How could anyone officially dead for years possess such knowledge, such skill? Every strike, every adjustment, every countdown was perfect. It was as if Ghost Mercer had merged with the valley itself, an omnipresent guardian watching, calculating, orchestrating their survival. The SEALs pressed on, moving through shattered rocks, smoke, and the acrid tang of burnt gunpowder. Jensen fell to a knee, wincing as blood soaked his uniform, but Hawk hauled him forward. "Keep moving. You can't stop now." Above them, the jet executed maneuvers impossible for its type, weaving through terrain, dodging fire that should have been unavoidable. Ghost's voice was unwavering. "Extraction point 30 meters ahead. Keep low. Use cover. 30 seconds until pickup." The enemy was relentless. Bullets shredded rock, kicked up dust, and found any exposed flesh. Ramirez fired methodically, taking down targets with surgical precision. Hawk moved beside him, scanning constantly for threats, heart pounding. And all the while Ghost guided them, his voice steady, unnervingly calm. 30 seconds, Ghost repeated. "Then you run, trust me, you'll make it." Hawk's mind replayed Ghost's legend. Mercer had been an ace pilot, decorated beyond measure, trained in missions that defied imagination. But he had been declared dead in a strike mission that vanished without trace, a victim of betrayal, fate, or both. And yet here he was, somehow alive, somehow present, somehow defying every law of logic to answer their call. The team reached a shallow depression at the edge of the clearing. Hawk counted 6 men, all alive, all breathing, all ragged and bleeding. The extraction point was just beyond, but enemy fire had intensified, closing the corridor of escape. Hawk keyed his mic. "Ghost, we're in position. Enemy tightening." A calm reply came. "Engaging now, suppression active, move immediately." The ground erupted with the roar of explosives and the searing light of flares. Enemy positions disintegrated with surgical precision. The SEALs surged forward, every step a defiance of death. Hawk glanced at Jensen, whose face was pale but resolute. "I don't know how, but he's real," Jensen muttered. The extraction helicopter's faint glow appeared on the horizon, the rotor wash stirring dust and debris. Hawk's pulse raced. They were almost there, almost out of the nightmare. But the enemy had not given up. Figures emerged from shadows, shooting at anything that moved. Hawk fired instinctively, heart hammering. "Almost there, guys, keep going." Ghost's voice cut through the storm. "You're almost clear. 10 more seconds. Don't stop. I've got your 6. Then, without warning, the valley shook violently. A missile streaked from the ridge toward the jet above. Hawk's stomach dropped. He wanted to look up but didn't dare. Ghost's voice was calm, unshaken. "Hold on, evasive now. You're still alive." The SEALs crossed into the clearing, hearts hammering, weapons raised. The helicopter descended, rotors chopping the smoky air, ready to lift them from death. Hawk glanced back toward the ridge. The last he saw was the faint glow of a jet banking sharply, smoke trailing, disappearing into the night. Ghost had stayed behind, facing the impossible to ensure they lived. Hawk swallowed hard, blood pumping, adrenaline screaming. For a moment the world was still, as if the night itself held its breath. Then the radio clicked. "Mission almost complete," Ghost said softly. "Get out alive. Remember this, never leave each other behind." Hawk stared at the horizon, unable to answer. Ghost Mercer, the man who had been declared dead, the legend who should not exist, had answered their call. And in that moment the impossible became reality. The SEALs climbed aboard the helicopter, battered, bleeding, alive. They had survived the night, but the legend they had witnessed was far from over. Somewhere above them in the darkness, a ghost remained, watching, waiting, ready to answer the final call for any who dared to be lost. And in Hawk's chest a spark ignited, a mix of awe, fear, and disbelief. Ghost Mercer had returned, and the night had only just begun. The extraction helicopter's rotors shredded the smoky night, churning dust and debris in a chaotic swirl. Inside, the SEALs clung to harnesses, muscles screaming from the sprint, adrenaline still surging. Blood-smeared uniforms and burned lungs, but their eyes were fixed on the horizon, desperate for the glow of safety. Every second mattered. Behind them, the valley smoldered with chaos, smoke, fire, and enemy fire. Yet above it all, the faint, almost surreal whine of a jet persisted, slicing through the night. Hawk pressed his back against the helicopter's frame, scanning the shadows below. Ghost Mercer's presence had been their lifeline, but now the impossible reality hit him. Their savior was still in the sky, unprotected, weaving through missile fire with impossible precision. Hawk keyed his mic, voice ragged but steady. "Ghost, status." "Missiles inbound, engaging, hold tight," came the calm, unshakable reply. The SEALs exchanged glances, disbelief mingling with fear. They had been saved once, but now it seemed Ghost himself was risking everything to ensure they survived. Hawk swallowed hard, gripping his rifle, heart pounding. The legend was real. Every story, every whispered rumor had been true, and it was unfolding before their eyes. Below, enemy squads were regrouping, firing in waves, forcing the helicopter to rise and dip with every gust and maneuver. Smoke and tracer rounds streaked the air like ribbons of death. Jensen winced, blood dripping from a shallow chest wound. Hawk grabbed him, shouting over the roar of the helicopter. "Hold on, we're almost clear." Above, Ghost Mercer's jet danced through the night sky. Missile flares lit the clouds, enemy rounds slicing through the darkness. His maneuvers were almost inhuman, diving, rolling, banking, and firing with precision that defied physics. Each strike was surgical, each movement calculated. Hawk felt a pang of awe and terror. He had seen air combat, had trained in it, but nothing could compare to this. "Ghost," Hawk yelled into the radio, "you're putting yourself at risk." "Not tonight," came the reply, calm and resolute. "You're my priority, move." The SEALs pressed forward, following the helicopter toward the extraction point. The valley erupted around them. Explosions tore through rocks, trees caught fire. Enemy fighters fell in scattered, precise chaos. Hawk thought he heard a whispered prayer escape his lips, though whether for survival, for the ghost, or for something deeper, he wasn't sure. Then the impossible happened. A missile streaked toward Ghost's jet, closing fast, almost too fast to track. Hawk froze, heart in his throat, but Mercer executed a maneuver so precise it seemed to defy gravity. The missile passed harmlessly, slamming into the mountainside with a deafening roar. Ghost's voice came again, calm and distant. "You're almost there. Extraction in 5 seconds." The SEALs surged forward, sprinting through rubble and smoke. Hawk hauled Jensen along, ignoring the pain searing his own leg from a shrapnel strike. Ramirez covered their flanks, taking down targets with sniper-like precision, even as enemy fire ripped past. The extraction point was just ahead, bathed in the faint green glow of night vision markers. But the enemy had one final surprise. A squad emerged from the ridge, their movements coordinated and ruthless. Hawk's stomach dropped. The helicopter was moments away, but the SEALs were exposed, their path to safety narrow. Jensen stumbled, blood pouring from his wounds. Hawk yanked him up. "Keep moving, don't stop." Ghost's voice returned, calm but urgent. "Suppressing fire engaged, clear path ahead, trust me, run." Above, the jet dove low, releasing flares that lit the valley in surreal, golden light. Enemy positions erupted, torn apart with surgical precision. Hawk pushed Jensen forward, hearing the faint but unmistakable hum of the helicopter's engines closing in. The extraction was within reach. Then a deafening roar shook the sky. Ghost's jet took a direct hit. Flames licked the fuselage, smoke trailing in thick black ribbons. Hawk's stomach twisted. His mind screamed at him, no, he can't die now. But Mercer did not panic. He banked the jet sharply, maneuvering it to shield the SEAL's path. The missiles slammed into the mountainside around him, debris flying, rocks tumbling. The SEALs pressed forward, their only thought to reach the helicopter, to survive, to live another second because Ghost had held the impossible for them. The helicopter descended, rotor wash kicking up dirt and debris in blinding clouds. Hawk slammed Jensen aboard, his own muscles screaming, his lungs burning. Ramirez followed, dragging one of the team's heavier casualties. And just as the last SEAL crossed the threshold, a faint transmission came through the radio. "Mission complete. You're safe. Go now." Hawk keyed the mic, voice shaking. "Ghost, do you copy?" "Silence." He keyed again. "Ghost, respond." Still nothing. The SEALs looked over the edge of the helicopter, scanning the dark valley below. No jet, no glow, only smoke, fire, and distant echoes of battle. Hawk swallowed hard. Ghost Mercer, the man who had been declared dead, had disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared. The helicopter rose into the sky, carrying the SEALs away from the valley, from death, from the impossible. Hawk felt a hollow emptiness gnaw at him. They were alive, but the man who had saved them might not be. Inside the cabin, Jensen's hand shook as he clutched Hawk's arm. We owe him everything," he whispered. Hawk nodded silently, unable to form words. The reality of what they had witnessed, what they had survived, was still sinking in. Outside, the night swallowed the valley once more. Fires still burned, smoke rose in thick columns, and somewhere beyond the clouds, a jet, battered but still alive, vanished into darkness. Ghost Mercer had returned from the dead, or perhaps had never truly left. The SEALs would tell their story later, in whispers, in classified briefings, in bars far from this war-torn land. But no one, not even command, could fully comprehend what they had seen. A pilot who defied death, answered the impossible call, and vanished again, leaving only survival and legend in his wake. And Hawk, staring out at the horizon, felt it deep in his chest. The war was far from over. Somewhere above, in the shadows of the night sky, Ghost Mercer was watching, waiting, ready to answer the next call. The valley was silent now, but the night had not yet given up its secrets. Somewhere a plan was already in motion, a mission unfinished, and the SEALs knew deep down that this ghost, this impossible man, would return when the world demanded it most. The helicopter continued its climb, carrying battered, bleeding, alive men. But one question burned in Hawk's mind, unspoken yet undeniable. If Ghost Mercer had survived this, if he had saved them once, why had he chosen to remain unseen? And as the valley disappeared beneath the darkness, one final thought haunted them all. Some legends are born not from what they leave behind, but from what they refuse to let die. The valley below was a charred scar on the earth, smoke rising in lazy columns that seemed to mark the aftermath of chaos itself. From the relative safety of the helicopter, the SEALs stared down at the wreckage, hearts still pounding, lungs still burning from the sprint and gunfire. They had survived against impossible odds. But somewhere above, beyond clouds and darkness, a jet, the impossible jet, moved like a phantom, unseen but undeniably present. Captain Eli Ghost Mercer had faced death before, but never like this. The missiles had grazed his wings, and the fuselage screamed in protest, lights flickering like a dying heartbeat. Fuel was dangerously low, and every maneuver further strained the airframe. Every pilot knows the moment when survival is no longer a choice. It is a gamble. And Ghost had chosen to stay, to protect men he barely knew, because leaving them behind was never an option. "Status," Ghost muttered to himself, scanning the valley below. He could see the SEALs boarding the helicopter, battered but alive. The enemy was regrouping, their assault relentless, but the SEALs had a lifeline now, even if it was fleeting. Ghost's hands moved over the controls with precision, almost dancing, each adjustment calculated to perfection. Smoke poured from the port side engine, but his focus never wavered. "Never leave them," he whispered, echoing the phrase etched inside his helmet, a mantra for missions long past. Below, the SEALs watched in awe. Hawk gritted his teeth, eyes scanning the horizon. "He's still out there," he muttered. Ramirez nodded, tension rippling through his shoulders. "And if he's still out there, he's taking the fight to them. That's insane." Ghost dove toward a ridge, using the terrain to mask his movement, evading enemy radar, their surface-to-air missiles, and gunfire. Each pass was calculated, precise, like a chess master moving pieces on a board of death. Explosions erupted behind him as he fired countermeasures, flares bursting into the night like stars imploding. He remembered the day he had been declared dead. Classified mission, vanished from radar, no body, no report, just silence. The world had moved on, assumed him gone, but some ghosts do not rest. Some wait unseen, answering calls that no one else can. Mercer had survived in the shadows, learning, adapting, and now, facing the impossible again, he moved with a purpose born of guilt and instinct. The SEALs' helicopter gained altitude, trying to put distance between themselves and the valley. Hawk's mind raced. "We can't just leave him," he muttered. Jensen, wounded and trembling, shook his head. "We can't. He saved us. He shouldn't have to die for us now." Ghost's voice came through the comms, calm and measured. "Extraction complete. Move east along the canyon. I'm covering. Enemy fire intensifying." Hawk keyed his mic, adrenaline making his voice shake. "Ghost, we're moving, but you need to get out too. You can't stay in there alone." "Not tonight," Ghost replied almost quietly. "Your priority is alive. Mine is making sure that happens." The helicopter dipped into the canyon, rotor wash cutting through the smoke and dust like a knife. Enemy forces were reorganizing, firing relentlessly at any target in sight. Below, shadows moved like predators, their intent lethal, but Ghost anticipated every movement, every firing line, every trap. A missile streaked from the ridge above, locking onto Ghost's jet. He felt the shudder of impact before the explosion, the airframe groaning in protest. His mind raced, calculating every option. Pulling up would risk the SEALs' corridor. Evasive maneuvers would strain the engine further. Yet there was only one path, one impossible path. He banked sharply, jet screaming as he twisted through the night sky. The missile slammed into the mountainside just meters from him, rock and debris exploding in a violent shower. Ghost's pulse surged. Every mission, every loss, every moment that had led to this point converged in a single decision. Keep going. Keep the SEALs alive. Inside the helicopter, Hawk and his team saw the flares burst across the night sky. They didn't know what had just happened. They only knew that the impossible man, the Ghost, was out there, risking everything, and they were still alive because of him. "Almost clear," Ghost's voice cut through the roar of engines. 20 seconds until the canyon opens. Run when you see it." The SEALs surged forward, every step a defiance of fear, every breath a gift stolen from the chaos. Hawk glanced at Jensen, whose blood-stained face was pale but determined. "We're going to make it," Hawk muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We have to make it." Ghost's jet roared past once more, banking low, sweeping enemy positions, shielding the SEAL's escape. He knew the fuel wouldn't last. The frame wouldn't hold much longer. And yet he pressed on, a living embodiment of devotion, of survival against impossible odds. A sudden explosion shook the valley. Hawk stumbled, heart in his throat. Jensen cried out, clutching his wound, and Ramirez aimed desperately at shadows moving too fast. Ghost's voice remained unwavering. "Move. Extraction in sight. You're almost clear." The helicopter rose, clearing the canyon. The valley below became a blur of smoke, fire, and chaos. Hawk's chest heaved, muscles screaming, but he didn't stop. They were alive. They were moving. They were being saved by a man who should not exist. And then a faint, terrifying moment of clarity hit Hawk. Ghost Mercer's jet was slowing, smoke trailing like a dark halo. Hawk's stomach twisted. Mercer was exposed, alone, and the enemy fire was closing. "Ghost, don't!" Hawk screamed into the mic, but the roar of the helicopter drowned his words. Mercer's voice came back calm, almost tender in the midst of violence. "Go, live. I've got this, trust me, always." The SEALs crossed the canyon's edge, disappearing into the night as the helicopter gained altitude. Hawk dared one last glance behind. Flames erupted from the ridge where the jet had been. Smoke curled into the sky, and then mercifully silence. Hawk's throat burned. "He's gone," he whispered. Jensen's hand tightened on his shoulder. Maybe he is. Some things aren't meant to be seen." The helicopter lifted higher, carrying the SEALs away from the valley, from the fire, from death. But deep in Hawk's chest, a question burned. If Ghost Mercer had survived this impossible night, had risked everything to save them, why had he disappeared again? Somewhere above the clouds, above the chaos, a man, alive, dead, or somewhere in between, watched. And the SEALs knew deep down that the war was far from over. The valley might have been behind them, but the legend, the impossible presence of Ghost Mercer, was still very much alive. And as the helicopter flew toward safety, one final thought haunted them all. Some heroes do not seek recognition. Some ghosts only answer calls when no one else can. The night swallowed the valley. The fires burned themselves out. And somewhere in the darkness, Ghost Mercer waited, unseen, unclaimed, and unstoppable. The SEALs were alive, but the legend was not yet finished. The helicopter roared through the night sky, carrying the battered, bloodied, and exhausted SEALs toward the temporary safety of a forward operating base. Each man sat in silence, muscles trembling, hearts still racing from the near-impossible rescue. The valley below had become a blackened scar, smoke spiraling into the sky, fires flickering against jagged ridges, the echoes of battle lingering like ghosts in the darkness. Hawk pressed his hands against his knees, trying to process what had just occurred. They had survived, but the man who had saved them, the ghost, was missing. Jensen's blood-stained uniform clung to his chest, and he winced every time the helicopter jolted. Ramirez kept scanning the horizon with his night vision, eyes sharp but empty. I can't believe he's gone," Jensen muttered. Hawk swallowed hard. He had seen merciless battles, impossible missions, but this, the precision, the skill, the courage, was beyond anything they had ever experienced. Ghost Mercer had existed in legend, but now Hawk knew the truth. Legends could be terrifyingly real. Inside the helicopter, communications were minimal. The only sounds were rotor blades, the groan of the airframe, and labored breathing. Yet, somewhere deep in Hawk's mind, questions swirled uncontrollably. How had Ghost survived? How had he known every move, every firing lane, every enemy position? How had he been able to appear at the precise moment to save them? And most importantly, why had he chosen to vanish again? Meanwhile, somewhere miles above, Captain Mercer's jet limped through fractured clouds, smoke trailing like a dark banner. He had escaped the valley physically intact, but the jet was barely holding together. Systems were failing one by one, fuel levels dangerously low, engine heat warning blinking incessantly, hydraulics groaning. Mercer's hands flew over the controls, precise yet almost desperate. He knew if he pushed too hard, the airframe would fail. And yet he had already made his decision. The SEALs were alive, and that was all that mattered. In the valley below, enemy forces regrouped, furious at the sudden annihilation of their squads. They had lost dozens in minutes, their command structures disrupted by an unseen force. Ghost Mercer's presence had been surgical, almost supernatural. Reports would later indicate a single jet had obliterated multiple positions with impossible precision, though no aircraft had been officially authorized. Those who witnessed it whispered about a ghost in the sky, a man who should not exist, who had somehow defied every rule of war. Back in the helicopter, Hawk finally spoke, breaking the tense silence. He didn't just save us, he fought for us and then disappeared. His voice trembled with disbelief. That man, he's not just a pilot, he's something else. Ramirez shook his head slowly. We're not even supposed to know about him. He was dead years ago, officially. Yet here he is, controlling the impossible. Jensen swallowed, pale and trembling. Do you think he made it out? Hawk didn't answer. He didn't know. All he knew was that Mercer had taken every risk, absorbed every attack and vanished into the night. And somehow Hawk feared that the ghost wasn't done. He never would be. Hours later, the helicopter landed at the forward operating base. Medics swarmed the SEALs, checking wounds, administering morphine and muttering words of disbelief at the intensity of the injuries. Hawk, Jensen, and Ramirez stumbled into the medical tent, exhausted but alive. Outside, the base was eerily quiet, the air tense with the aftermath of what had been a near-apocalyptic night. Command was already assembled inside the operations tent. Faces were grim, eyes wide with disbelief. Flight logs showed no authorized jet, no pilot, nothing. Yet the SEALs had survived against impossible odds, and there was undeniable evidence of precision strikes in the valley, destroyed enemy positions, captured intelligence, and the absence of their would-be killers. A young operations officer cleared his throat nervously. Sir, the reports don't make sense. No aircraft was cleared in that sector, and yet the enemy positions gone, casualties minimal. How did they survive? Hawk spoke slowly, voice raw. It wasn't just luck. Someone saved us. Someone who shouldn't exist. The room went silent. Then a commander spoke, voice tight with disbelief. You're saying Ghost Mercer? Hawk swallowed hard. Yes, Ghost Mercer. Whispers filled the room. A legend, officially dead for years, was now the only explanation. But no one had answers, only the uncomfortable weight of awe and fear. Meanwhile, somewhere at a remote, classified airstrip hundreds of miles away, a battered aircraft landed silently. Smoke trailed from the fuselage, warning lights flickering red. The pilot slid the canopy open and stepped out, movement slow but deliberate. Eyes hidden behind flight goggles, scars etched across a face hardened by decades of combat, Captain Eli Mercer surveyed the empty airstrip. No medics, no command, just wind and shadows. He had survived, but the airframe would never fly again. Every system had failed, every warning light screamed, yet he had delivered his mission. The SEALs were alive. Mercer removed his helmet, running a hand across his face, exhausted but resolute. Inside the helmet, etched in permanent marker, were the words he had carved years ago, "Never leave them." The ghost had kept his promise. Hours later, the rescued SEALs gathered quietly at the base, in a dimly lit briefing room. Medics had cleaned wounds, patched injuries, but the tension remained. They could not forget the terror, the precision, the impossible skill that had saved them. Hawk stared at his hands, imagining the jet streaking through the night sky, Ghost Mercer weaving through fire, smoke, and death just to ensure their survival. Ramirez broke the silence. Do you think we'll ever see him again? Hawk shook his head. I don't know, and maybe we shouldn't. Some things are meant to remain legends. Jensen, still pale and trembling, whispered, He didn't just save our lives, he changed them. Forever. Outside the base, the desert wind whispered through sand and rock, carrying no trace of the battle that had raged hours before. Yet in the minds of those who had survived, the memory was indelible. Ghost Mercer's legend had grown. He had saved the SEALs. He had faced impossible odds, and then he had vanished, leaving only questions, awe, and a promise etched in silence. For Hawk, one thought refused to leave him. The ghost was still out there, somewhere in the darkness, ready to answer the next impossible call. And somewhere in a distant classified airstrip, Mercer was already planning, already watching, already waiting. The night was quiet, but the war, unseen, unacknowledged, was far from over. Ghost Mercer had delivered the impossible once. The question remained, when the next call came, would the world be ready for him? The SEALs would never forget the night. They had survived against impossible odds, guided by a man who should have been dead. They had witnessed a legend alive, and it had changed everything. Yet as they drifted into a fitful sleep, haunted by fire, blood, and the impossibility of what had just occurred, one truth burned in their minds. Some ghosts never rest. Some answers never come. And some heroes remain unseen, existing only in the moments they are needed most. The legend of Ghost Mercer had just been reborn. Morning came slow at the forward operating base, pale light seeping through dust-smeared windows. The SEALs sat in silence, injuries bandaged, adrenaline fatting into exhaustion. Even the medics whispered behind gloved hands, exchanging looks that combined disbelief with awe. Somewhere beyond the concrete and wire, the valley they had left behind smoldered, scars of battle etched into the earth like an unwilling memory. But here the question haunted every mind. How had it happened? How had they survived? Hawk rubbed his temples, eyes heavy but alert. He replayed every second of the night in his mind, the impossibly precise airstrikes, the voice guiding them, the flares, the jet weaving through missile fire as if untouchable. It wasn't luck, he muttered under his breath. It was someone unbelievable. Jensen, still pale, traced his fingers over the bandages on his chest. "We've all seen combat," he said softly. "But that was something else, something impossible." Ramirez, eyes still sharp despite exhaustion, finally spoke. "He saved us, every one of us, and then he vanished." Hawk nodded slowly, silent for a long moment. "The ghost isn't just a legend," he said finally. "He's real, and whatever else he is, he's watching." Back at Central Command, the story was entirely different. Official logs made no sense. Radar had picked up no authorized jet in the area. No pilot was cleared for operations over the valley. Yet there was physical evidence, destroyed enemy positions, captured intelligence, and the undeniable fact that every SEAL had survived against impossible odds. A young operations officer shuffled nervously, presenting the data to a roomful of commanders. "Sir, there's no record of any aircraft, nothing in the logs. Yet these strikes were precise. The SEALs survived with almost no casualties. It doesn't add up." One of the senior commanders leaned back, voice tight with incredulity. "So, someone flew in a jet, destroyed enemy positions with surgical accuracy, and then vanished?" "Yes, sir," the officer replied. "According to the SEALs, the pilot used the call sign Ghost Actual." The room went silent. A legend, thought dead for years, now explained the unexplainable. Yet no one dared speak it aloud. Mercer had been declared KIA during a classified mission years ago. Officially, he no longer existed. Yet somehow, he had answered the call in the deadliest situation the SEALs had ever faced. Meanwhile, at a remote classified airstrip, Mercer had landed his battered jet hours earlier. Smoke trailed from the fuselage, warning lights blinking furiously. Medics and security had arrived to find the craft empty, no pilot inside. Mercer had vanished. All that remained was the charred aircraft and his helmet, cracked but intact, etched with a single phrase: "Never leave them." The airstrip's mechanics, perplexed and awed, exchanged whispers. Who did this?" one finally asked. No one had an answer, only a growing certainty that Mercer, the ghost, had once again disappeared without recognition, unbound by protocol, law, or reason. Back at the base, the SEALs gathered around a small table in the mess hall, replaying what had happened in fragmented recounts. Hawk's hands shook as he described the jet, the strikes, the maneuvers. Jensen added details about the flares, the way Ghost had guided them like a guardian angel. Ramirez spoke last, his voice quiet but firm. "We're alive because he stayed. He didn't leave, even when it could have meant his death." A silence followed. The SEALs didn't sleep that night. Some stared at the ceiling, imagining a man flying through the sky, dodging missiles, striking with perfect precision and vanishing without a trace. Others closed their eyes, but even dreams could not erase the memory of fire, blood, and impossible skill. Meanwhile, intelligence reports poured in, satellite footage confirming the strikes. Analysts scratched their heads. There was no authorized jet in the area, no official pilot. Yet the strikes were undeniable. Entire enemy positions had been destroyed with surgical precision, coinciding perfectly with the SEALs' escape. Whoever had executed it was no ordinary pilot. Hawk was summoned to a classified operations briefing the next day. Screens lit up the room, displaying the night's events in excruciating detail. The destroyed positions, the flight paths, the timing of strikes, all impossible to replicate. An intelligence officer, voice tight with disbelief, said, "Sir, officially no aircraft should have been able to do this. No pilot cleared. And yet the SEALs survived, all of them." Hawk met the officer's gaze, expression grim. "You want me to explain Ghost Mercer?" he asked. Silence followed. "He's real," Hawk said finally. "He's alive, and he's out there somewhere, watching, waiting, answering calls no one else can." The officer's mouth opened, then closed. No one spoke. Legends didn't belong in official briefings, but Hawk knew the truth. They had been saved by someone who refused to exist. Weeks passed, and the SEALs returned to temporary duty. Yet the legend haunted every conversation, every mission debrief. Command tried to erase the impossible from the records, classify the events, label them as anomalies. But the men knew what they had witnessed. The ghost was real, and he was still answering calls. Meanwhile, Mercer remained off-grid. No base, no command, no mission orders. Just the wind, the night sky, and the next impossible call that might come. He had survived years declared dead, a ghost in both life and legend. And he would continue to answer when the world demanded the impossible. Hawk, sitting alone in the mess hall one evening, stared at a photo of his team before the mission. Jensen's face, pale but alive. Ramirez, determined and unbroken. And somewhere above, he imagined Mercer flying through clouds, waiting for the next call. Hawk's hand hovered over his comms unit, fingers itching to reach out, to thank, to speak, and yet he didn't. Some legends, he realized, weren't meant to be contacted. They existed only in the moment they were needed. A faint ping came through the secure network. Coordinates. Time. No sender. Hawk froze. The coordinates were for a location miles away, abandoned, desolate. The SEALs exchanged worried glances. Something was calling, and the ghost always answered. Hawk keyed his radio. "Mercer, you copy?" Silence. Static. Then a faint, calm voice whispered over the line, almost impossibly clear. "I see you, don't move, stay low, you're not alone." The SEALs stiffened. Goosebumps rose on their arms. This was not a drill, this was real. Ghost Mercer, the impossible, unseen, legendary pilot, was reaching out again. Hawk's jaw tightened. "He's still out there," he murmured. Jensen nodded slowly. "And he always will be." Outside, the desert wind carried no trace of him, but in their hearts, they knew the truth. Some ghosts never rest. Some legends never die. And some answers only appear when the world is at its most desperate. The ghost had returned once, saving the SEALs against impossible odds. And he would return again, when called, from nowhere, unseen but undeniable. The world may never know, but the SEALs did. And that knowledge burned in their minds, a fire that would never fade. Ghost Mercer had survived. Ghost Mercer had saved lives. And Ghost Mercer remained, always watching, always waiting, always answering the impossible call. The story was far from over. Weeks had passed since the impossible night in the valley. The SEALs were back at a secure base, patched up, debriefed, and technically alive, but none of them slept easily. The images of fire, tracer rounds, and the jet that had appeared from nowhere lingered in their minds like a living nightmare. They had survived, but the memory of the ghost haunted them. Every shadow, every engine hum, every distant flare set their hearts racing. Hawk sat alone in the mess hall, hunched over a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. He replayed the night over and over, Ghost Mercer's jet weaving impossibly through enemy fire, the precise strikes that obliterated their pursuers, the calm, unwavering voice that guided them to the helicopter. And then, the sudden disappearance. The jet gone, the ghost gone, leaving only awe and questions. Jensen walked in, still pale from his injuries but determined to join Hawk. "You think he's still out there?" he asked quietly, almost afraid to hear the answer. Hawk didn't respond immediately. He stared at the window, imagining a lone jet slicing through the night sky. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "But if he's alive, he's waiting for the next call, and when it comes, he'll answer." The next call came faster than any of them could have expected. It began with a ping on their secure comms, coordinates, time, and a single word typed into the message field. "Help." Hawk froze. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Jensen leaned in. Ramirez joined them silently. The message was brief, but its implications were massive. The ghost, the man who should not exist, was reaching out, and the urgency in the message was undeniable. Hawk keyed his radio. "Mercer, do you copy?" Static. Then the unmistakable, calm, precise voice of Ghost Mercer filled the comms. "I see you. Coordinates received. Extraction impossible on the ground. Prepare for unconventional insertion. Stay low. Trust no one outside this channel." The SEALs exchanged tense glances. It had been weeks since the ghost had appeared, and now he was asking for their help. Hawk swallowed hard, muscles tensing. "We're ready," he said. "Tell us what to do." The mission was impossible. The coordinates led to a remote region deep in enemy territory, where intelligence suggested a high-value target had been compromised. Mercer's message was clear. Conventional support would fail. Only the SEALs, under his guidance, had a chance, and Ghost would be their eyes, their strike, their shield, but he would remain unseen, untouchable. Hours later, they approached the insertion point under cover of darkness. The terrain was jagged, the air thick with tension. Hawk led his team, Jensen and Ramirez close behind, moving silently through rock and brush. Every instinct screamed danger. Every shadow seemed alive with threats. And somewhere above, unseen but omnipresent, Ghost Mercer guided them, his voice calm, precise, unwavering. "Left 20 meters, Mercer instructed. Enemy patrols at 50 meters, 2 o'clock. Suppressing fire in 3, 2, 1, move." The SEALs obeyed instinctively, every step a choreography of survival. Bullets tore through the air around them, but they moved as if shielded by a ghostly hand. Hawk glanced at Jensen, who barely breathed, yet followed every command without hesitation. Ramirez kept scanning relentlessly, covering their flanks with sniper-like precision. They were alive, and Ghost Mercer was orchestrating their path as if the terrain itself obeyed him. Then the impossible happened. A series of explosions erupted ahead, and Mercer's voice guided them again. "Covering fire deployed. Extraction point visible. Run when you see the flare." The SEALs sprinted toward a clearing. Dust and smoke swirled around them, tracer rounds streaking like ribbons of death. Hawk's pulse raced, muscles burning, lungs screaming, but he didn't stop. Each step brought them closer to survival, closer to the impossible. At the edge of the clearing, a faint glow appeared, the extraction point, illuminated by the flare Mercer had deployed from above. Hawk hauled Jensen forward, ignoring his own fatigue. Ramirez covered their rear, scanning for threats. The SEALs were almost clear, almost alive. But then a terrifying realization struck Hawk. The enemy had anticipated their path. Another squad emerged from the shadows, moving faster, more organized than ever. Hawk froze, heart hammering. They were trapped. and the helicopter could not reach them in time. "Ghost," Hawk shouted, keying the radio. "They're closing in, we're pinned." "Engaging," Mercer's voice replied, calm as ever. "Suppressing fire in progress. Do not stop. Extraction in 5 seconds, trust me." The ground erupted with explosions, precise and surgical. Enemy positions disintegrated under fire that seemed to come from nowhere. Hawk and his team surged forward, hearts hammering, muscles screaming, using the chaos to escape. And above it all, Mercer's presence was palpable, guiding every move, shielding them, orchestrating survival like a ghostly conductor. The SEALs finally crossed into the clearing. Hawk glanced back, and for a fleeting moment he thought he saw a jet streak across the clouds, weaving impossibly through enemy fire, then vanish. Mercer had saved them again, appeared, struck, vanished. Inside the helicopter, the SEALs collapsed, breaths ragged, bodies trembling, adrenaline spent. Hawk's eyes were wide with disbelief. Jensen muttered, He's not human." Ramirez nodded slowly, voice tight. "He's something else entirely." Hawk keyed the mic one last time, voice raw. "Mercer, do you copy? Thank you. We're alive because of you." Silence. A faint whisper echoed through the comms, almost inaudible, almost ethereal. "Stay alive. The world isn't ready for me yet, but I will answer, always." The SEALs exchanged tense glances. They knew the ghost would disappear again, and they knew deep down that wherever the next impossible call came, he would answer. But this time, something felt different, something more urgent, more dangerous. As the helicopter rose into the night sky, leaving the valley and enemy forces behind, Hawk stared into the darkness, imagining Mercer's jet weaving through clouds and fire. His heart ached with gratitude and fear. The ghost had saved them twice now, but every time he appeared, the danger grew. Every time he vanished, questions multiplied. Hawk realized the truth. The ghost wasn't just a pilot. He was a force, a protector, a legend that refused to die. And when the next call came, they would need him again. The SEALs were alive, but Mercer's story was far from over. Somewhere above, unseen, the ghost waited, watching, preparing, ready to answer the call that only he could answer. And Hawk knew with a sinking certainty that when the ghost reappeared, the world would witness something it had never seen before. Something that defied explanation, defied death, and defied belief. The ghost had returned. The night swallowed the valley. Smoke lingered in the desert air. And somewhere, miles above, Ghost Mercer vanished into the shadows, a phantom in a world unprepared for his presence. But one thought remained etched in Hawk's mind. Some legends never leave. Some calls can only be answered by ghosts, and Ghost Mercer would answer them all. The sun was rising over the forward operating base, casting pale light across sand-swept terrain and concrete bunkers. The SEALs sat in the mess hall, exhausted, patched, but alive. Their injuries had been treated, and their adrenaline had finally ebbed, but none of them spoke much. Words couldn't capture the impossible events they had endured. The night's fire, smoke, bullets, and explosions were still alive in their minds. And above it all, in every unspoken thought, loomed the presence of Ghost Mercer, the pilot who shouldn't exist. Hawk stared at a blank wall, his fingers tracing invisible lines, still replaying every second of the impossible missions. Ghost had appeared twice now, guiding them, shielding them, striking with surgical precision and vanishing into thin air. No radar logs, no recognition, no proof, just survival, and the memory of a man who existed only in legend and reality. Jensen broke the silence, voice trembling. "Do you think he's really gone this time?" Hawk shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "He never leaves, he waits, he watches, and he answers the calls no one else can." Ramirez, always stoic, finally exhaled. "We're alive because of him, we owe him everything, and yet we might never see him again." The words hung in the air like smoke. The SEALs had lived through impossible odds, twice, guided by a man whose skill and bravery defied comprehension. Ghost Mercer had become more than a legend. He was a force, a guardian, a phantom who moved through the night with purpose. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, in the faint glow of a hidden airstrip, a lone figure emerged from the shadows. Captain Eli Mercer removed his flight helmet, hair disheveled, sweat and grime etched across his face. His jet lay in the hangar, battered, systems offline, engines cold. He had delivered every mission successfully, yet his presence remained unacknowledged. Mercer moved silently through the deserted airstrip, checking maps, coordinates, and secure transmissions. There was no celebration, no acknowledgement, only preparation. Another mission would come. Another impossible call would echo through the static, and he would answer it just as he always had. Back at the base, the SEALs gathered to debrief for command records. Their account was carefully worded. Unidentified aerial support, they said. They omitted details of Mercer's interventions. No one could verify a ghost in the sky, and no one would dare question the impossible. But the men knew the truth. They had seen him, heard him, survived because of him. Hours later, Hawk wandered outside, standing at the edge of the base, looking toward the horizon. The desert wind stirred, carrying dust and whispers. He closed his eyes, imagining Mercer's jet streaking across the clouds, performing maneuvers no human should survive, guiding the SEALs with an almost supernatural precision. Hawk's chest tightened. Gratitude, awe, and fear battled within him. A faint ping sounded in his comms, a secure signal encrypted beyond standard clearance. Hawk's pulse quickened. Coordinates flashed on the screen. He keyed the mic. "Mercer, do you copy?" Static, then the unmistakable voice, calm, precise, resolute. "I'm here, you're safe, rest now. But never forget, some calls cannot be ignored. Some missions demand ghosts." Hawk swallowed, voice barely a whisper. "We won't forget, thank you for everything." The voice was gone. Only the faint hum of distant wind remained. Mercer had vanished again, leaving nothing but legend, memory, and the knowledge that the impossible had been real. Later that evening, the SEALs sat together under a fading sunset, sharing a quiet moment of camaraderie. Their uniforms were patched, wounds treated, but their hearts carried the weight of what they had witnessed. Hawk spoke softly, voice carrying the weight of understanding. "We were saved by something that shouldn't exist, a ghost, a protector, and we have to honor that. Live our lives, stay alive, be ready. Because when the world calls, he will answer, and so must we in our own way." Jensen nodded, still pale but resolute. "He didn't just save us from death," he said. "He saved us from doubt, from fear. He reminded us that some legends are real." Ramirez leaned back, silent, eyes distant. "And some ghosts," he said finally, "are always watching." The SEALs fell into silence again, listening to the desert wind, imagining Mercer flying above the clouds, a guardian unseen, untouchable, a force that defied reason. They knew that the ghost would return, that the next call would echo, and that he would answer as he always had. In the distance, beyond the horizon, Mercer watched, his mission complete yet never truly finished. Every life he saved, every impossible call he answered, reinforced the legend that refused to die. The world could not claim him. No protocol, no record, no command could contain him. He existed outside the rules, a living testament to courage, precision, and relentless devotion. Hawk thought about that, staring at the stars emerging over the desert. Some men live and die, bound by orders and bureaucracy. Ghost Mercer lived beyond that. He was alive in legend and reality simultaneously, a force answering the impossible, always unseen, always ready. A soft whisper of wind moved across the desert, stirring sand and shadows. Hawk smiled faintly, understanding. The ghost would be back, and when he was needed, he would appear, and then vanish again. Because some calls cannot be ignored, some legends cannot die, and some ghosts remain eternal. The SEALs rose together, heads held high, hearts heavy with awe and gratitude. They would carry the memory of that night forever, the impossible reality of survival, and the legend of Ghost Mercer, a man who should have been dead but wasn't. And somewhere miles above, a jet streaked across the sky, unseen, unstoppable, answering the call that only he could hear. The legend remained. The ghost endured, and the impossible had become reality.